Hello, I'm Lisa Bien, and welcome to Bouncing Back. Imagine spending a day at school, going from class to class, and then at the end of your day, you have to think about where will you sleep for the night, where will you shower, where will your next meal come from. Today, we will meet a young lady who confronted that horrific circumstance. She's here to share her story of living a life of uncertainty about housing and food, and to help all of us understand the issues that students on almost all college campuses are facing. We will hear from a very strong and courageous woman about her struggles with homelessness, and she will explain how she bounced back. Let's get started. Hello, I'm Lisa Bien, and welcome to Bouncing Back.
God makes a way.
Be honest and communicate.
Be your authentic self.
That's so critical. Thanks for joining us on this edition of Bouncing Back. Let's welcome our guest, Marissa Myers. Marissa grew up in a difficult home, raised by a single mom who struggled with mental health issues. Social services first became involved with her family when she started in kindergarten and continued all the way until she was 16 years old. Abuse, poverty, and mental illness had created an anxious, unstable, unreliable situation. She's here today to share her story as she fought through the difficulty that she faced in her college years. Today, Marissa is a practitioner, researcher at the Hope Center for College, Community, and Justice here on Temple's campus. Thank you for joining us today. First of all, you're an incredible person, and I'm just so excited to have you here today to be on the show and share your story. And there's so much I want to talk about. So let's get started and talk first about social services. Comes to your house, you're in kindergarten. You really remember kindergarten?
Not so much.
I was going to say, because I can't remember kindergarten. That was I just wanted to get that out in the air now. So social services comes to your house in kindergarten.
Yeah, so I think, it's hard to remember some of the positive memories. I don't remember my 5th birthday, but I remember my first time in foster care, and I remember the police coming to my house every week, and I remember feeling like I wasn't like all the other kids. Things were different for me, and the older I got, the more I started to realize that. But I think when I first started to pick up on that was when I was in kindergarten, and I talked to other students and friends, and things were different, and I didn't want them to come over to my house because I was embarrassed and ashamed of what was going on.
It's interesting that you say that. I realized at a young age I was different, right? So it really impacts your self-esteem really early on, right? So you didn't want your friends. That had to be hard, right? You're growing up and you don't want your friends to come to your house. Did you find yourself like making up stories almost, like your life was different, or you really, like how did you make do for while you were in school?
So it's funny that you asked that, because when I was in kindergarten, my mom came in for parent-teacher conferences, and my teacher said, "Oh, I heard about Marissa's father in Puerto Rico and her little brother." First of all, I am not Puerto Rican. Second of all, I did not know my father. And third of all, I have no brothers or sisters.
I was going to say, I don't remember what I was talking about.
Yeah, so I made up this whole elaborate story of why my father was not in my life. And my mom said, "Whoa, wait a second. This is, I don't know anything about this." And so that was when I first started making up those stories.
Yeah, so I can imagine what it's like, because you're in school. Where did you grow up?
Northeast Philadelphia.
Okay. I knew I liked you. We're both Northeast Philly girls. I grew up in Northeast Philly too. Yeah, so you grow up in Northeast Philly, which is a working class, wonderful neighborhood, right? And now you have to make up stories,
right,
to survive, right? So tell us what it was like when you decide you want to go to do something different. Maybe did you go to prom like everybody else?
I did. At first I wasn't going to go to prom because I bought my first Saturn card that I paid while working at Subway, making $5.25 an hour.
So you always worked, probably,
oh, yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Like how old were you when you first started working?
Don't tell anyone, but I was 12. I started selling newspapers door to door, but I didn't have my working papers yet. So.
Okay, well, we won't tell anybody. It's my secret now and your secret. So your mom had mental illness. You're in kindergarten. You're in elementary school. You're making up stories. That's a tough road to go through. And you're at 12 years old, which, by the way, I think I started at 11 or 12 too. Babysitting. I wasn't ambitious like you. Newspapers. It was easy to babysit. And so you knew you were different, and how do you tell me how you deal with the mental illness and all this going on, and make it you find your way to college?
So I knew at a young age that I really wanted to give back, and at that point I had not bounced back yet. I was still bouncing.
It's amazing though. What I do find is the people on the show, they come on the show and they always want to share their story, which is so awesome and amazing, but they always immediately want to give back. It's almost like what we go through in life is destined to be our calling, so to speak. So
Absolutely.
I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
So when I was 12, I had overdosed on sleeping pills and went to school. And at that point, I had decided that things were too hard. The anxiety, the depression started to set in, and I realized that I was truly different than everyone else, and that the battle was really going to be an uphill climb.
At age 12.
At age 12, yeah.
So at age 12. You overdosed
on sleeping pills.
So
yeah.
what happens? You overdosed. You went to school.
It was a cry out for help. It was
a scream for help, right?
Yeah, it was a scream for help. And at that point, I had really started to struggle with depression, and so they took me to a crisis unit, and I told them that I was trying to get high, but that wasn't true. And at that time, I realized, okay, I have two options. I can either take my own life because this is too hard and I just can't do it, and I give up, right? Or I could spend the rest of my life giving back and making sure that kids didn't have to experience what I was experiencing. And look, I was not good in school. It wasn't like, happily ever after that happened, but I decided suicide's not for me. I'm not going to go that route. I'm going to choose the other path. And it was the much harder path, for sure.
Well, it's just suicide is not for anybody. Death by suicide is not for anybody, but I'm certainly glad that you were young and smart enough to understand that. That's so impressive. That's really impressive. So you're on this journey to give back. You're certainly giving back here at Temple, which we'll get to, but I still want to get to your story a little bit because I want people to understand that there's always hope when they're out there, right? So how is your mom today? What's your relationship like with your mom today?
So my mom suffers from borderline personality disorder, and if you've seen Mommy Dearest and know anything about Joan Crawford and No More Wire Hangers, that was my mom in a nutshell. And unfortunately, things never really got better, and so I cut things off with her 3 years ago, and that was about the time when I realized that she just wasn't good for me and she wasn't willing to change, and I didn't want her involved in my kids' lives, and so that was really, it was time for me to let her go.
I asked that question because we do a lot of shows. We've done a few shows here about people who have suffered from mental illness themselves, but we haven't really necessarily talked to somebody who has lived in a home where there was mental illness to see how that impacted them. So there's so much to cover today, right? We have so much to cover. So, well, good for you. You made a choice based that was good for you, right? So you still suffering from anxiety and depression? Is that something that is, comes and goes?
Yeah, so anxiety for sure. There are things that I know I'll struggle with for the rest of my life that it's what happens when you have trauma, but I try to spin those into positives, and a lot of researchers and psychologists and social workers will say, oh, Marissa, you're hypervigilant. That's such a bad thing from experiencing this trauma. But I like to say, yeah, but that makes me detail oriented. And when someone needs me to check grammar, that is, I pick up on those things because I'm hypervigilant.
Oh, is that? I didn't know that. Is that a product of anxiety, or that's a product of
abuse, trauma, where you're hypervigilant, so you're always scared, you're always, on edge, and when you see someone behind you, you're like, oh, are they trying to attack me? And so it just means that your senses are a little heightened. You're hyper aroused, and that comes from trauma, abuse, neglect. That's something that a lot of people struggle with.
So your mom neglected you, correct?
And abused me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So there was abuse, neglect, anxiety, depression, all started at a very young age for you.
Right, and there were
Wow.
about 7 child abuse reports that were confirmed before I was finally removed from my mom's house for the first time.
You're amazing. So you were removed from your mom's house at what age?
9.
9, okay. And so did you go with family?
No, so I didn't have any family.
Okay.
My grandma was schizophrenic and lived with us.
That's right.
And there was a lot of fighting going on. My dad wasn't in the picture, contrary to
the story that you told everybody. It's funny, and I don't like to make these shows about me, but I will share with you that I used to do that. I told funny stories that, I think at one time I told people that I was adopted and my father was, because my father left when I was 2 at a very young age. So I can understand. That's why I asked you that question about it, because when we're growing up, not even when we're growing up, I think sometimes even today in college, you want to be like everybody else, right? We say that this is the stomping ground to really be different and find your individuality, but there's a lot of folks that still try to be like other people. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And the interesting thing is, I didn't go and live with family or a foster family. So I lived in an institution with 80 other kids. The first placement I went into was with about 40 other kids. It's called St. Vincent's for Children.
I know exactly where that is, right? It's Northeast, right? Is it still around today?
Yeah, well, they merged with another social service organization, but they're still around, and I still had to switch elementary schools, and then they transitioned me to a more long-term placement, St. Mary's Village for Children, out in Ambler, where I got to go to Fort Washington Elementary, where I didn't look or talk or feel like any of the other kids.
Well, that's a whole other show. But anybody from Northeast Philly doesn't look or talk like anybody, right? We're from Northeast Philly. I still get that. They're like, how you say Wooder? Because we're from Northeast Philly. So now you're in second. Is that your second foster care?
Yeah, and I'm living with 80 other kids.
And you're living with 80 other
a few
kids.
white kids, which is always interesting because of the color of my skin. A lot of times, other kids didn't feel like I belong there, or that I must be of privilege, or that I didn't live the same lifestyle that they did.
Right, that you were privileged being there.
Right, so a lot of fights, and then I was reunified back with my mom. So a few school changes, institutional placement, and then went back with my mom. So.
Wow.
Because that clearly was working out, and that's the thing, Lisa. I just want to make sure that, I say this on the show, that people think about foster care and they think, oh, a kid goes into foster family, has a mom and dad to take care of them. But really, foster care can mean a number of different things. There's kinship care, which means you're in the place of, or living in the house of a family member. There's an actual foster family, but there's also institutional placement, group homes where you're just living with 12 other kids. And oftentimes you don't realize that those kids were in foster care. And one of the things that I always mention to students is that when I was filling out my FAFSA and, filling out the financial aid forms, the question had asked, were you ever in foster care? And I said no, because I thought foster care meant you had to have foster parents, not institutional placement.
Gotcha. Well, you know what? We're going to take a quick break here. We're going to continue our conversation about bouncing back from homelessness, and when we return.
Disaster tips from the objects left behind.
My home wasn't insured, but you can check your insurance policy now to make sure you're covered. Oh.
My savings are lost, but you can put money aside and plan for unexpected disaster costs.
We're lost forever, but you can scan important documents now so they survive.
For more tips on how to prepare, visit ready.gov.
This year, patriotism shouldn't just be about pride of country. It should be about love. Remember that to love America is to love all Americans, because love has no labels.
I came from 5 generations of teachers. Losing my job was the bottom falling out of my world.
Welcome back. We are talking about bouncing back from homelessness with our guest, Marissa Myers. So, Marissa, we took a break right before you were telling us about filling out the FAFSA form, and you were saying you were filling it out, and they said you live with your parents?
No, so they had asked if you had ever been in foster care before.
Right.
And I answered no, because I never had foster parents, so I didn't think of, living in a group home as being in foster care. So I missed out on that financial aid that I could have received, which I'm kicking myself about now.
Are you serious? You couldn't go back and change it a little bit?
Nope.
Okay, so you apply to college, you get in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you were on campus, you were homeless as well, or housing
Housing
insecure, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so there were times when winter break was happening. My mom had been arrested and lost her job my freshman year. Winter break came around. I had nowhere to go but to my mom's house, and so I went there. But I ended up making a really solid relationship with my study abroad advisor, who is now at Temple, and I'm still really close with her. But we ended up connecting and developing a strong relationship, and so I lived with her a few times when things got too bad at my house because there were no other housing services, and so it was either living in an abusive house or home, living on the street, or couch surfing and living with my study abroad advisor.
All right, so I think it's an important time right now to talk about, because you mentioned housing insecure versus homelessness, right? So just for the good of the conversation, I want to make sure everybody understands the difference, right? Housing insecurity is just not knowing where you're going to sleep for the night. Homelessness is you really have nowhere to go, correct? You have no options.
Right, so sleeping in a shelter on the street, that is what we say.
That's called homelessness.
Right,
okay.
Right. And so food insecurity and housing insecurity is when you don't know where you're going to be sleeping or eating.
So you went that way for 4 years. You said couch surfing. Does that mean you go to try to find a place where you could maybe sleep for the night, that someone won't see you?
Yeah, so hey Lisa, I don't have a place to sleep tonight.
Oh,
Is there
okay.
any chance I can crash on your couch? That's couch surfing.
Interesting. Okay. So you made your way through college and you met this woman. What was her name?
Leslie McCabe.
Leslie McCabe, and she's here on this campus, and so she's like an angel for you, right?
Oh, I wouldn't have made it without her.
So you're on campus and you meet her and she lets you crash or live there for there
was one summer she helped me get a job right across the street from her, and kept me under her wing, and she wanted me there so that she could help support me because I was really struggling, and
Wow.
so it was amazing.
Wow, that's amazing. She really is she's like your guardian angel. And I believe there are guardian angels all over. I don't care what anyone says, we all have them. So, and I'm sure that you are more inspired than ever before to give back with your story, because you're an amazing woman. So you go to undergrad, and then you went to graduate school at Penn, right? Yeah. Now you're working here. So tell us about the work that you are doing today at Temple.
Sure. So I'm a practitioner researcher at the Hope Center.
And what's the Hope Center? Can't just go past the Hope Center. Let's talk about the Hope Center.
So the Hope Center is still in the infant stage. I like to say they're in the infant stage. I'm in the newborn stage because I just started about 2 months ago. But the Hope Center is studying the needs of students who are experiencing housing and food insecurity. While we are focusing on issues nationally, we are lucky to be here with our home base at Temple University.
Okay, so obviously this is an issue, the homeless, the housing insecure, food insecurity. We've done one other show about this, and I just believe that you can't ever really do too many shows about this because it's such an important issue. Right. Just before we even started the show, we were sharing it with some folks, and they said, we didn't even know that this existed, right? So it's not just prevalent here. And I think something that you said is really interesting and important to remember is that one time in your life, you were on spring break or you had to face break and you didn't know where to go. Now, I know there's some universities, are we doing it here yet, where you can stay here on campus in your dorm or something for the break?
So we have something called a single point of contact, which is the dean's office, and that means that you should be able to go there and find resources, whether you're hungry, homeless, whether you're a former foster youth, you can go there and receive services.
The dean's office, I just want to make sure everybody's clear, so in case that they're experiencing something like this as well, they can go to the dean's office and at their school, correct?
Temple has that, but not all schools have that, unfortunately.
Questions asked, no questions asked. Tell us about the program. How easy is it to? What are the resources here on campus other than just going? You go to the dean's office. What happens next?
Well, so it's often that folks think that if you have a food pantry that can solve, hunger, that can solve the students' issues. But really, it's just about saying, okay, here's a can of beans, here's some cereal, here's some ways to make some sandwiches so that you're not hungry. But that's really just a Band-Aid, and that's a temporary Band-Aid for like the day. So when you go to the dean's office, you can receive counseling services, as you've mentioned, with anxiety and depression that comes with being a former foster youth.
So you can go to the dean's office, and there's a myriad of services that you can get.
Right. So single point of contact means you can go there, and they can
I didn't know
recommend you
that.
to all these different services.
I had no idea. I've been on this campus for a really, really long time. I did not know that. That's good to know. But so the Hope Center where you are right now, tell us about that. That's anybody. Can anybody just stop in and say that they're food insecure, looking for food? Tell us what you do there.
So we are not a social service provider, so we're not able to go and get students into housing services, but we can connect them. Especially for me as a practitioner researcher, I come from the social services world. So we have our research team, and then we have the practitioners who can say, hey, I know of X, Y, and Z service. Let's get you into this program. Let me make some calls. Let me send you the application.
So there's people on site that are helping students on site at the Hope Center, correct?
We will all gladly take an email, a call, a student that will stop into our office to help them, but we're not necessarily the ones providing those services. It's more so linking them out to services that we're aware of.
Okay. Do you take donations at the Hope Center?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can donate to the Hope Center, or you can donate to the FAST Fund, which is faculty and students helping together, I think. I'm the acronym, I'm not sure exactly what that stands for, but that is something that Dr. Sarah Goldrick-Rab had designed to help students around the country who were struggling with homelessness and food insecurity. So if you are a professor and you know that you have a student struggling, it's a quick way to help that student.
Well, it's interesting because I've been a professor here about 15 years now, and I think it was the last 2 or 3 years we had to put something on our syllabus about it, any. Yep. Yep, I think that was it was the woman who started. I can't think of her name.
Yeah, Dr. Sarah Goldrick-Rab is the one who started that.
I remember it was a big article, and now it's on all of our syllabuses, which I'm so excited and happy that it's there. And then you wonder, as I look out at my class, and I have like 20 students, you wonder, is there anybody in that room that is, housing insecure or food insecure? And
right.
So I think it's important that, we covered your story, which is pretty amazing story that you're sitting here to share today. So thank you for that. We talked about, the Hope Center, and we talked a little bit about what the students can do to get some help. But I think what we really need to talk about and spend some time on is where do you get the bandwidth when you're going through such adversity in your life to really keep moving forward? The show's called Bouncing Back. I say moving forward, whatever you want to say, but it's not every day we meet somebody like you who can do that. There's people that are struggling today with all kinds of issues, right? So where do you find your, I love to ask this question, where do you get your grit, right? Where do you keep going? I mean, we're on Temple's campus and we're all about the grit, and we love our gritty, reputation. We're a tough school, but how did you do it? Where did you, and tell someone who's watching this show, give them hope.
Well, I always like to start by saying that difficult doesn't mean impossible, and so it's hard. I try to be honest. It is really hard and really difficult. The road is not easy, but it doesn't mean that you can't do it. And so that's just really something important to remember. If I could get that kind of tattooed on my forehead, I would, so that I could
say that again so everybody hears it again, because I like to say really important things 2 or 3 times, because when you say 2 or 3 times, people remember it, right?
Sure, and I am known to talk fast, so.
Yeah, and us Philly girls, that's how we talk. We talk fast and we talk a little slurred.
All right, so difficult does not mean impossible.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Difficult does not mean impossible. Okay,
exactly.
But along the way, you had to say, life is challenging at different times, and your childhood and your youth was, were challenging.
Sure.
But look at you today, right? You're here at the youth, you're here at the Hope Center. I heard a little rumor that you might be buying your own house.
Fingers crossed. We
crossed.
just put in an offer, so really hopeful and happy to stay in Philly. But I would say there's an image that I share in a lot of my presentations, and it's this curve, right? And in the middle, there's resilience. Resilience is a common buzzword that we talk about now. And on one side, on the lower level, you have PTSD, depression, anxiety, suicide. And the other side, you have post-traumatic growth, which means that you are growing. You are using your trauma to ensure that you are growing and turning those things like hypervigilance into a positive, right? So you have a small number of people who do that, a small number of people who suffer from all these different mental health issues, and then you have the middle. So what I'm trying to do is is make that curve kind of, have more people have post-traumatic growth and saying, okay, you suffered all these setbacks in life, what can we get from that? How can we move and be a better person? And always striving to improve on those things is really the thing that I try to get through to students.
Yeah, so you're in the middle though, right? And when you're in the middle, it's not easy.
Yeah, and you can go one way or the other, right? So when you're in the middle, you're like teetering, okay, I am struggling with depression and anxiety. How do I get over that?
But can we even change that for like a second, honestly? It doesn't even need to just be for anxiety, or it could be any major challenge you are faced with right now in life, right? Mm-hmm. You're like teetering to the left, right? Go back. I want to stay where I am, right? Or I want to move to the right. But in the middle can be so challenging, right? And we make it sound like there was nothing easy about what you did. There was nothing easy about what you did. Now, you did tell me that at one point you had somebody who made a donation to you, your education. You didn't even know who it was, right?
Right. So 3 days before I was about to enter I believe it was my sophomore year, here I finished my freshman year of college, and then the economy crashed. And I thought I had this credit score, and I thought I got my loan from the first year. I'm good to go. And I got denied from about 10 different loan companies. And 3 days before I was about to start school, I thought, this is it. I'm done. It is impossible for me to go to school. This isn't about, be gritty or just try a little harder or work a few extra hours making hoagies. No, this was a matter of I don't have the money and I've maxed out my student loans. There was an anonymous donation made with over $2,000 to my student loan bill or my student account bill, and financial aid called me and said, hey, get your butt over here.
I'm going to end that right there, because it's like, hey, get your butt over here. We had a donation for you and got you to college. So my thanks to our guest, Marissa Myers, for sharing her experiences and her insights. Wow, amazing. Today's show is a reminder that even when you have no idea how you will reach your goal, you can't see the light, to just never give up. No matter what label you were branded as a young child, when you really, really want something, you have to believe that it's possible to attain it. You have to be your own best friend and always, always be your own advocate. You and you alone really do have the power to create the life that you deserve. Once again, I'm Lisa Vienne, and I look forward to seeing you next time here on Bouncing Back. Hello, I'm Lisa Vienne, and welcome to Bouncing Back.
God makes a way.
Be honest and communicate.
Be your authentic self.
That's so critical.